and stayed quiet while the boys broke the monotony with jokes and laughter. The two working alongside her were called Big and Mikey, she gathered, and the other one was Kipper, a nickname she hoped for his sake. In any case, there wasn't much point making friends. Labourers were rotated from cargo to cargo as they were needed. You were never part of the same team for long. All sorts of cargoes travelled along the Regent's Canal. Timber, grain, arsenic, manure. But ice was the one Mabs hated most of all. It was slippery when you needed it to be stable, and sticky when you needed it to slide, and altogether spiteful, Mabs always thought. Hours later, her arms and legs were shaking. Her feet inside her worn boots were completely numb. She wasn't certain her negligible strength was even helping anymore. Exhaustion, cold and the murky light blunted her senses. As yet another block of ice swung up and away from them, Mabs groaned and leaned back against the remaining stack, her face tilted up towards the distant sky. She closed her eyes, unbearably weary. A sudden, resonant clang and a horrified yell from above startled Mabs out of her soporific state, and she opened her eyes to see a 300-weight block of ice dropping like a boulder. The boys sprang away, sharper than she was, but Mabs couldn't move. The shock of seeing that huge, heavy dead weight hurtling towards her was too great. The next instant she was knocked sideways and found herself face down, cold ice beneath her, a warm body above. She felt that body flinch with every crash as the ice smashed to the ground, sending daggers of ice flying everywhere. And then it stopped. The shade was eerily quiet once more, and the weight above her lifted. Mabs rolled onto her back. Then she climbed to her feet. Her legs were as weak as water, but she couldn't stay lying there. She'd freeze. One of the boys, Kipper, had saved her, knocked her clean off her feet. He stood in front of her now, a disbelieving expression on his face, hay-coloured hair sticking up in alarm. "It wasn't moving," he said in a disbelieving tone. "I couldn't," she said. Swiss Louis came scrambling down the ladder, babbling apologies, terrified in case someone had been killed. They showed themselves to him, all intact except for Big. One of the flying ice daggers had buried itself in his leg, and Swiss Louis helped him to climb out of the ice well. Mabs watched him disappear over the top, stared at the trail of blood that was left dripping down the ladder. She felt sick. "Oi!" An incensed bellow came from above. The foreman came to glower and see what was going on. "May as well employ a bunch of bleeding monkeys," he shouted, and spat into the well. "Clear it up. Get it sorted. We ain't wasting it. Stick it in buckets and get it up here. Now!" "Right then," said Kipper. "Back to it." "Wait!" cried Mabs. "You saved me." "Thank you." "No need for thanks. There's little enough we can do for each other round here," he called back as he jumped down a level and started gathering ice shards. Mabs was shivering hard, the shock setting in. But what could she do other than to follow suit? Much later, Mabs dragged herself home, feet scuffing the hard canal towpath, then the cobblestones of Clerkenwell, and finally the filthy streets of Saffron Hill. A light rain had come in, and the purplish night closed around her as she went. Dark shapes in doorways suddenly writhed and resolved into human beings, stretching out hands for coins or calling out unseemly remarks. Mabs kept her head down and her coat drawn tight about her, glad of her boy's clothes. She'd lived in this area all her life, and apparently it wasn't as bad as it used to be. Still, it elicited no sentimental attachment in Mabs. The men of the Daly family had been working the London canals for more than 100 years. Her great-great-grandfather, Jack Daly, and his sons had been part of the crew that had built them, and all the male descendants thereafter had laboured at the wharfs, loading and unloading the barges. When Mabs was small, she used to think the canals were exciting. Pa would come home with his man's tales of life at the hub of the universe, and he made the waterway sound like roads of high adventure. He thought it a fine...